Pathfinder is all about exploring a world with a character controlled by a player character. You might encounter traps, items, monsters, or other characters. These characters that are not controlled by players are called NPCs. There are tons of NPCs in Paizo's new book, NPC Core. Thank you, Paizo, for my complimentary copy. Monsters are also NPCs, but in common parlance, we kind of assume monsters are usually hostile and want to fight, whereas NPCs can be complex, intelligent, and have desires, like wanting to fight. An NPC can have 5 possible attitudes towards you on a scale from helpful to hostile, but these can get easy to mix up. It's better just to sort them into 3 categories. If an NPC is hostile, it's just like most monsters. That doesn't mean it will mindlessly attack. If it's injured, it might try to run away, or try to negotiate. But the other side of the spectrum is helpful, which is another way to say the NPC is your ally. Allies don't mindlessly follow orders, they still have desires too, and they're controlled by the GM, but they'll probably help you out. Allies can be commanded with the action request. Request costs 1 action and lets you make a diplomacy check against an appropriate DC for the NPC. On a critical success, the NPC does it, and on a success, they do it, but they get a bit sassy about it. The official rules for request are a bit vague, but you can take a lot of inspiration from the action command an animal, which works almost the same way. You spend an action to make a nature check against the animal's will DC, and if you succeed, the animal performs that action. You could follow a similar formula for request. Make a diplomacy check against an NPC's will DC, and if you succeed, the NPC will do approximately 1 action or 1 tactic, like keep attacking that guy. You should also follow the rules for difficulty for command an animal. Adjust the DC if the NPC has a good attitude toward you. You suggest a course of action they're predisposed to, or you offer them a treat. You can use difficulty adjustments on the DC, like reducing it by 5 if it's very easy, or by 10 if it's extremely easy. If you make a request but get a failure, the NPC doesn't do it, but they might do something similar, but less useful. On a critical failure, then the NPC's attitude towards you goes down. That's when we get to the 3rd category of attitude. Most NPCs are helpful or hostile, not because it makes sense, but because it keeps the game moving. If you go to the local blacksmith because you want to buy a new sword, well, the blacksmith wants you to buy a sword, you want to buy a sword, and everyone at the table just wants you to get on with it, so there's no need to play out some advanced interaction. The blacksmith can just be helpful and sell you the sword. But what if you're exploring a thieves' hideout filled with hostile enemies and monsters, and then you come across a blacksmith hired by the thieves? That's kind of on the fence about the whole thief thing. This could be interesting, so you can use the social system. There's 3 attitudes between helpful and hostile: friendly, indifferent, and unfriendly. Friendly NPCs are still receptive to the request action, but the main difference between these attitudes is just their distance from the helpful and hostile categories. That's because you can change their attitude towards you with the make an impression activity. Make an impression takes 1 minute, so it can't be effectively used in combat. You make a diplomacy check against the will DC of the target, and a success improves the target's attitude by 1 step, a critical success by 2, and a critical failure decreases their attitude by 1. Make an impression only lasts for a given social encounter and can only be done once per conversation, although that might be up to GM discretion. If you can get the indifferent thief blacksmith to be friendly, you can probably convince him not to alert the thief lord to your presence as a request. Instead of slowly building up a strong relationship, you could go the opposite route and use coerce to quickly get the NPC to do what you want at the expense of a long-term relationship. It works like make an impression, but you make an intimidation check against the NPC's will DC. If you succeed, the NPC will do what you say as long as it's not super self-destructive to a maximum of 1 day. After that period elapses, they become unfriendly to you. The difference between critical success and success is if they're afraid to retaliate against you. Critical failure makes the target instantly hostile. 1 more action you can take in social situations is lie, which takes at least 1 round and is a deception versus a perception DC. The lie must be reasonable, but on a success, the target believes you. Like monsters, all NPCs have a level. Since Pathfinder is mostly a game about fighting monsters, level represents how good you are in combat. So normally a level 3 smith, like the one in NPC Core, would have statistics for level 3 fighting, but level is also the fundamental building block of the game, and nearly all statistics are based around it. That's where non-combat levels come in. As written directly in the stat block, a smith is a level 3, but is level 6 for any smithing or crafting challenge. With non-combat levels, an NPC might be a trivial combat encounter, but a difficult social encounter. If the player characters encounter the Prime Minister, it's level 0, which means it's not good at fighting, but it's level 10 for any political encounter that might require convincing them of something. Fortitude and reflex are really bad, but perception to sense motive and will are as good as a level 10 character. Convincing a Prime Minister to do you a favor might be appropriate for a level 10 adventurer. Another way NPCs stay relevant longer is through troops. Troop is a trait on a creature that means that creature in combat is actually made up of a bunch of creatures. For example, a level 4 diluted mob is made up of a bunch of commoners, but when they band together, they effectively make a gargantuan level 4 creature. For the most part, troops are still treated like a single creature in combat, and might require some extra narration about how each hit point that is destroyed is another member of the troop being defeated. But there are a few mechanical distinctions functions. Troops are usually gargantuan if they're made of medium or small creatures. However, this size is better described in segments, which are a function of the creature's HP. A segment is just a 10-foot square that can be arranged in any manner. Like a troop with 4 segments could look like this, or even this. But as the troops lose HP, their number of segments will reduce as well. Their abilities might become less powerful too. Like the diluted mob's Throw Detritus throws detritus in a 10-foot burst, but this is reduced to a 5-foot burst when it's only 2 segments. Segments must always be contiguous by at least 5 feet. For the purpose of multi-target attacks, consider each segment to be 5 creatures. If a spell only targets 1 creature like Charm, then it won't work against a troop. But if it targets 5 or more creatures, like 8th rank heightened Charm, then it can affect 1 segment per 5 targets. And the segment HP relationship works both ways. If you 8th rank Charm a hostile mob and make 2 segments friendly so they don't attack you, then the troop's HP goes down to the threshold where it would only have 2 segments left. Troops can move by moving 1 segment, and then arranging the rest of the segments behind that segment as needed. Troops can also just reshape themselves, but at least 1 segment must stay in position. Most of the NPCs in NPC Core are assumed to be human, but you can also apply a set of ancestry adjustments to any NPC to make a human NPC into a version of a specific ancestry. Let's say the Prime Minister was actually a lizard folk. All you do is add the Uruxi language, a swim speed of 15 feet, and change fist attacks to claw attacks that do the same damage but are slashing instead of bludgeoning, and they can hold their breath for longer. Nothing really changes about their combat ability, so it's pretty simple. That means when it's possible, it's probably better to use the ancestry-specific stat blocks. For example, you could turn the diluted mob into a diluted mob of goblins, but there's also a goblin get gang, which has extra goblin abilities like Goblins Chant and Goblins Sing, which makes it difficult to concentrate. Check out my adventure Shrine of the Crystal Cave, link in the description.